Yeah, so what led you to start this project? You're from San Francisco, right?
In New York.
And New York?
So it actually had a different origin story. We were trying to tell a different type of story. We wanted to profile different people in various cities that we had felt had been sort of left behind in the narrative of America. And just through your process actually of interviewing people and sort of reaching out. And at the time, Detroit was always in the media as a sort of third world country that, you know, looked abysmal on the media, and it was always so negative. And I think we were both drawn to that of like, this can't be as bad as people are saying, and what was
Or as good as people were saying. One of the things that I thought was really interesting too is that people would use it as like, oh, that's where you can go if you want to start anything. Like Detroit is like a blank slate.
Right.
There's 700,000 people there. It's not a blank slate.
Right, as if no one had lived there already. And we sort of just went through that process of exploring the community because admittedly, you and I knew nothing about Detroit and quickly became, you know, friendly with people in the community. And actually the people there are amazing. And there was sort of this first initial like, who are you? Are you trying to give us negative press? We don't want anything to do with that. We're trying to work hard here to rebuild things. And when we finally convinced them that that wasn't our goal, closer? It's very loud. That trust happened, and the people there were extraordinary and saying exactly that. Like, we've been here this whole time trying to work and rebuild, and just because it's great that Twitter is building an office, but we've been here the whole time. So that was a big part of it.
I'd also love to move straight into Q&A if we have any sort of like questions from the audience, because I feel like this is kind of a friends and family affair.
You want to just ramble on.
Yeah, so we can give this to the audience if anybody has any thoughts.
Yeah.
Michael?
Michael Springer?
Yeah, how did you guys come across these particular people you highlighted in the video?
Sure, I can start with that. One of the things that I always recommend to people when we do these screenings is when you're thinking about getting involved with a community of any kind, even your own, is to go to the places where you naturally think like, oh, maybe the local YMCA needs a volunteer. But you go to them and you say, who inspires you guys? Like, who in the community really is doing work that you think is valuable? And what you find is that those people then link you to projects that are much more fringe. And that's sort of how we found the people in this film, is we went to the people that were doing amazing things in Detroit that have been publicized. And we went to the next level down and the next level down, and that's where we found people who were really on the edge of actually whether their project was going to succeed or not. And that was a powerful experience, and that's I think where hope lives, is the idea of people who are on the fringe doing something because they believe it's right, but not knowing if the end of it is going to be what they hoped.
Yeah, I just agree with that. The network kind of kept expanding and growing, and it was also amazing to see how supportive they were of one another. That's not always the case in certain towns and communities where people say, oh, you know, I'm doing something awesome here at the local church, but you should really check out what's going on at the shopping center or a school. So everyone there was really supportive and kept leading us to other people.
You have the chief of staff of the mayor, and then you had the mayor for like that one scene. I reacted that you were not able to get them to participate at the governmental level because their reaction seemed pretty defensive in juxtaposition of the citizen activists. Is that accurate? And how far did you get with that?
Okay, so that's actually very perceptive. That's Steve Engel, who has an incredible sense of story. So the basic deal with Detroit, the city of Detroit, no other documentaries that have talked about Detroit have the city government participating, because they just don't. Because they really view any sort of criticisms of what they're doing as not complimentary to the work. The great thing is that Alexis Wiley, who's the chief of staff for the mayor, was originally a journalist that we had originally were going to put in the Stephen Henderson role, who's the fantastic journalist that you see in the film, sort of breaking down the city and how it kind of got to where it was. Alexis was going to do that work for us. And then she got hired, because this was actually a tactic of the city of Detroit, was to hire really great journalists into the city government and pay them more. So they would get to this position where they would be like, well, how am I going to keep struggling as a journalist if I can make this great money as a PR agent for the city government? And so, in effect, they were limiting the sort of like hard-nosed journalism that was happening in the city of Detroit by hiring these people. But to our credit, Alexis was like, well, I kind of vouched for you guys and was really into this project before I got this job, so I'll do this interview. But there's nobody else who had that kind of access and was able to actually even put them on the spot and say, if this city isn't going to be, you know, a small San Francisco-esque 7x7 downtown, if you're really going to try and include the 142 square miles that make up the city of Detroit, how do you serve all these people at the same time? And she had to say, well, people are going to choose where they want to live. And that's a very dicey proposition of like, the people who live in those neighborhoods that make up 80% of the city, and it's 500,000 to 700,000 people who live there. Those people aren't making the choice to live there. They're hoping for a better life, and they're hoping that if they keep working and doing the things they're doing every day, that things will improve. But the idea is that the city government is actually considering opposite alternatives, and really hoping that if they concentrate on the downtown, they put any money that they get towards the downtown, they'll be able to continue as a city, which they don't believe is possible if they try and support the full 142 square miles. So that's a long way of saying that the city did not want to talk to us, but luckily Alexis felt like she owed us one.
And it's just too bad, by the way, that they don't recognize the value of the citizen activists, because at the end of the day, what came across, I think, so well, is that their heart and soul is being put into this, but they're still marginalized.
Yes.
And if the perspective is different from the government and they're not antagonistic and fearful and defensive, they have a lot better chance of success.
Yes, and I think in terms of a Brooklyn audience, you know, a lot of the kids that are there that are doing amazing things are from Brooklyn. And they're like, hey, you know, I came here with 10 grand and I was able to buy a building and do all these amazing things. And the reason they came is the energy that the people in the neighborhoods have originated. And the city is trying to capitalize on that, but the fundamental disconnect is the idea that they're trying to capitalize on that without listening to the people that generated the original energy.
Well, that came through really well.
Oh, good.
Question, Richard?
Yeah, there is a sort of a tension between the top and the bottom, and you get these wonderful grassroots, bottom-up energies congealing, right? In the church group, the fellow who was, you know, working those warehouses into something, the basketball, you know, training and inspiration groupings. Those kinds of bottom-up, you know, dyed in the wool, I'm going to commit to my neighborhood, the one I grew up in. That is the strongest part of every society. And then you have the government moving in with this, you know, high concentration area where the downtown arts and the restaurants and all of that, which is beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily connect to the grassroots. But you still need the flow. And to my mind, when you get this critical balance between a grassroots effort, the activists, the churches, and the kind of energies that come in when artists move into a neighborhood, like what happened here in this crazy town, you know. The artists in this area took over the warehouses, all right? They were called the immersionists, or they called themselves the immersionists, or somebody called them the immersionists. They immersed themselves here and had these networking events. And they built a network. and they worked with activists, and there was a lot of correspondence and a discourse here. Probably nobody knows about it. It was in the early 1990s mostly. And the problem was that when the flow of money comes in and starts to exploit all of that kind of bottom-up energy, there's nothing in place to prevent the problem that follows. And that problem which follows is exactly the same problem that created the post-industrial desert in the first place. And that problem is a concentration of wealth and power.
Thank you, yeah.
I'll go you one better.
Roll. Yeah.
What I think is fantastic about what you just said is the idea of gentrification, right? Like the concept of it, I think, has very specific connotations, but the pervasive nature of it is actually what this film more so deals with, right? Like there aren't necessarily certainly high-class people trying to output low-income people, but the concept that I think gentrification gets to, which is more an equivocation to what happens maybe in this neighborhood, is the idea of people with means deciding the future of a neighborhood for people who don't have means but live there their whole lives. And that's something that I think is really nasty.
I would agree with you. If I could just say one more thing, which is that
Please do.
the problem we saw that happened in Williamsburg was not gentrification per se. What happened here was not gentle at all. The problem was development of high-rises, which came about through specific decisions made by City Hall. That is, tax abatements, rezoning. They rezoned from light industrial to residential. They gave tax abatements to the high-rises. Okay? That's development dumping. Some people call it dev dumping. Write that down. D-E-V-D-U-M-P-I-N-G. It's dev dumping. Gentrification is a really mixed up word. We might as well retire it. And we need to start breaking it down and looking at these dynamics.
That's fantastic. Absolutely.
Next question? No, I mean, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess, maybe I'm an optimist, but I like to think there are two sides of every story. The guy that went and put up those tickets on the graffiti art didn't necessarily think, he wasn't trying to be a bad guy. He thought, what's the other side of that story? That was just something that popped up while you guys were talking. And I also wanted to ask, what were the hardest choices that you had to make in terms of what you left out and what you included in the film? And can you tell us about it?
Well, where I would start with that actually is that Dana and I had a pretty strong heart-to-heart about what is the essence of this story, right? Like the idea that you could take either side of that altercation is is the person who's trying to enforce an upward trajectory of their community, which is kind of the policeman's impetus, or do you go with the person who is doing something that maybe not be previously culturally correct, but actually maybe the new culture of that city closely aligns to what he's doing. And I think that Dana actually really gave us the strength to really tell that story, which I think is the harder story to tell. I think the policeman who writes those tickets is really hoping to be sort of reactionary to something that may already be happening, but Derek in that neighborhood is actually the person who is ready to live or die by the convictions of what he hopes that neighborhood could be. And that actually is the thing that makes Detroit an exciting story and an exciting example of urban renewal. And when you think about what can an area that isn't being utilized become, and he said it more clear than I think anybody else does in the film in terms of if you don't really connect with the people who've lived there for 50 years, you're not doing a service to that area.
Another part about how we decided what was in the film is actually we went in wanting to show so many positive things that I remember watching the first cut and we had shown it to a few people and they were like, so what's the problem with Detroit? It seems so great, I want to move there. We're like, oh no, there was
like we're trying to show actually that these people are fighting against everything, whether it's the government or other members in the community or just the way that it's structured and everything that's happening. So we had to actually go back and be more revealing of the challenges that these people were facing, because you could paint this very beautiful picture of this promised city that you could move back to, but that wasn't the case. These people were truly night and day giving everything they had to, I mean, Pastor Barry, like, the man just lives and breathes trying to fix the community, and that's not an easy job. And I think the first few times around we just kept showing, oh, these people are so strong and uplifting, but we weren't actually showing the other side of what they were going up against. So that was something important to us, that we had to show what they were truly fighting all the time.
So my question is, the people that you engaged with today, did you show them this film, and what were they happy with the perception that you guys kind of conveyed in this film?
Oh my God. Okay, this is my favorite thing. So Pastor Barry is like always looking for the analogy, right? Like he's a pastor. Like nothing is what it is. And he was like, it's like a baby, and it's like, you wonder if when the baby comes out, if the baby's gonna be cute or not. You know, you have to love it because you're part of it, but like, is it gonna be cute? And he was like, the baby's cute. So I was very happy with that. Somehow, in a very strange way, was like the highest praise I could get from him. He thought the baby was cute.
So I've never heard such articulate people in my life. I couldn't believe.
You're talking about us, right? You're talking about the people in the film.
Yeah. But man, those people, I mean, they weren't reading a script. They were talking from their heart. They were so off the cuff, friggin' eloquent. And so I guess there was a moment in the film where you have the song about the water, and I, for a moment, thought like something happened to the church because the basketball court that was destroyed. And I thought, oh my God, where are those kids going? What are they going to do? But how do we like support the church? How do we support what they're doing? Because I just want to drop everything and figure out how to help.
Okay, great. So one of the things I think is really impactful is that Pastor Barry has this of course, he has 5,000 sayings, but one of them is ministry costs. And there's something else about the idea that like a church makes money when they're doing X, but ministry costs. And the thing that I always had to tell him with this film, when he was getting very excited about the possibility of him being able to make some money off the film, he's like, can we keep the lights on? Is this going to help? And I was like, I don't think so. I think this actually falls under the idea of you just demonstrating your heart and hoping that other people can take the reverberations of that. So the end effect of this is, I would say, if you have an instinct to help Pastor Barry's church, that, you know, look in your own community. There's going to be 100 things that are on the edge of having a future or not, and putting that there, because I really appreciate what you got out of the film.
Does anybody have a hat?
And there's a hat request.
Can we pass a hat around for that church, please?
Oh, you know, I will tell you that, so Pastor Barry in Lansing, we had this beautiful experience. I mean, now I'm just telling stories, but so Lansing, I didn't realize when I decided, oh, we'll go to Lansing. It's a great screening near Detroit. When I was being flown out to a screening in Detroit, it's an hour and a half away, each way. So I was like, we're going to do a 3-hour drive to Lansing, essentially, for a screening. And the people there were really lovely. There was a woman in the front who was like, can we pass the hat for Pastor Barry? And he took his little, like, godfish hat off, and they passed it around, and he made $1,000. And that's beautiful for that community. And I think the instinct to help the things that he's doing is really powerful, but yeah.
If you want to help, you certainly can help. It's Church of Messiah. I know. But if this is on your own accord, absolutely. This film is not a commercial for Pastor Barry, but of course you can help. It's Church of the Messiah. Yeah. And I think it's on our website. Yes. We love Pastor Barry. We want to support him, but as the director, he cannot say that this is just a film to fund Pastor Barry. So we understand. Yeah. Wait, how much more time do we have? We don't want to.
I'd love one more question.
Yeah, one more question, sir.
Maybe Craig's got a question?
Oh, I do actually, yeah. So my question is, obviously all the characters, everything's very compelling. As a filmmaker, when did you decide that I've got my film? Because everything, I feel like you can still be filming this for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Dana was integral in the process of me not filming this for 8 years. She was like, I brought her something that I thought was close, and she was like, no, you're not there yet. And like, you're not even close. And then she was like, a year later, she was like, okay, now you're done. Stop. You don't need to do anymore.
That's the artistic process. Anyone else?
If you could choose one particular moment that was challenging during the production of this film that you would like to share with us, what would it be, and how did you overcome it?
And how did we deal with this?
I'll give an intro. I'll give an intro to a story that Dana's going to tell that will close this bad boy out. Oh, it's such a good story, though. Okay. So one of the things about coming to a community that you have no connection to is that you have to acknowledge that you have no connection to that community and do the best you can to be receptive to the things that that community requires or accepts. So, and just sort of wade in, to sort of what the expectation is. And the hope there is that you get it right. And if you don't get it right, you're willing to adjust. And we had one story where we were a little bit off in the beginning in terms of trying to find the right characters for these things. Because so much of this was a process of discovery and trying to find people who are in communities that were marginalized, and so marginalized voices don't get heard. So the idea that you're going to like single-handedly go find marginalized voices is actually pretty audacious. And so we found some voices that were close to marginal.
I think another challenging part too was, actually exactly what we were just talking about, that we were immersed in a world where we truthfully wanted to give a platform and a voice and help people, and we were there to observe. That was actually a huge challenge of it, because you want to step in and be like, well, how can we do this? How can we do that? We had to watch it kind of unravel naturally, and seeing people face these issues is challenging, but it's also very rewarding, because then at the end of the day they were able to tell their story.
I'm gonna take an Instagram of this and send it to them, and this will literally mean their lights are gonna stay on next month.
Thank you, everyone. That's incredible.
And I think I alluded to this before, but people from Detroit, I don't know if anyone is from Detroit in the room, but they are very loyal, intense, creative people who, if they feel like you are not genuine, they will shut you out. And that was probably one of our first and greatest challenges, is saying like, we are here, not to quote The Bachelor too much, but we're here for the right reasons. We truthfully.
There have been so many bad stories about Detroit.
Yes,
that the armor was like, it was like the idea of somebody being like, hello.
Right.
And they're like looking at you through like the peephole. Like they're very ready to shut you out.
Yeah.
Detroit.
So that was getting over that and really trying to show them that no, we actually want to learn about what you're doing, and show people and inspire other people in communities that might be suffering from the same challenges, about how to rally and meet other people. So I think that was one of the biggest ones, of just sort of letting the wall had to come down, and that took a while, and that's just time, and that's documentary filmmaking. You have to really immerse yourself in where you are, and you can't just show up and be like, you want to make a film about you? It's so great. Just give us some sound bites. It really, that's not genuine. So.
And it wouldn't work. They would tell you,
they would see right through that. Yeah.
So how long did you spend there?
3 years. 3 years from the day that I was like, hey Dana, I got a cool idea. So
Also, it's very cold there. That was also a challenge.
Yeah.
We like skated around on a basketball court, an indoor basketball court that had maybe 3 feet of sheet. It's very cold.
I will say, to this lady's credit and a few other people, and I guess my own, We hired a location scout who took us to some of those like areas that they call it ruin porn. It's the idea of going to a place that's been sort of degraded to a level where it's somehow beautiful to our expectations. And we went and did that stuff, and Dana went to all those places at a high danger level, like in terms of slipping and falling and like landing on a nail, like all of that was very possible there. And so
Yeah.
hats off to her for, it was one of the first things you have to do to say, like, if I'm really going to tell a story about this place, like I have to be willing to go there too. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for all being here. This was really